So it's Friday the 24th of June, the morning after the referendum vote. And my ritual that morning, like any normal morning after a polling day, is to have a hearty breakfast and then go about collecting all the garden stake boards that we've put up during the campaign. And as I was doing this exercise, I had two conversations that really struck me. One was with a Newnham resident, that's the ward that I represent here in Cambridge, who had voted to remain. Married to a German, lived in Cambridge for 15 years, had two young children. And they were absolutely distraught. They were distraught because they didn't know what was going to happen to their jobs, they didn't know what was going to happen to their family, and they didn't know what was going to happen to their lives. The other person was a woman who stopped me in the street, actually, as I was pulling a Remain board out of somebody's hedge, and said she'd actually voted to leave. And she'd voted to leave believing that we actually wouldn't do it. Believing that it was a protest vote against the government. It was a protest vote against the establishment. It was a protest vote against politicians. And now she felt deeply guilty. And I mention this story because I think it illustrates the impact that the referendum vote had on everyone. And a year later, I believe that that impact is still as much felt by everyone and will be felt by everyone in this region going forward for a long time. So, as a politician, I'm used to winning and losing. And in particular, as a Liberal Democrat politician, we have our more share of losing rather than winning. But let's not dwell on that. So I am used to dusting myself down, picking myself up, saying that next time I'm going to deliver more leaflets, knock on more doors, and we will be successful. But that Friday morning for me, it not only hit me in my head, but it hit me in my heart, in my soul. Because at that moment, what we saw is we saw the Brexit genie being released from a bottle. And that cast a spell on this country. It cast a spell on the politics and the people. And what we saw is it acted as a catalyst for things like hate crime, for things like political leadership elections, quite a lot of them actually, except for us. And it also impacted in terms of the economy and uncertainty. And that uncertainty has been eating away in terms of people, jobs, companies and institutions as we've progressed through this journey over the last 12 months. And to illustrate that uncertainty and the immediacy of it, let me give you a local illustration. The county council building a solar panel farm in Soham ended up having to pay £500,000 more, purely because the exchange rate changed in that immediate period after the referendum. So that's just the immediate impact that clearly impacts budgets and therefore people across the region. But if you look at the economy in general, it's not just that immediate impact, but it's the many other impacts that we've felt over the course of the last 12 months and what we will increasingly see over the course of the next 12 months and in years to come. Now what I'd like to do is just spend a moment shining a light on two of those sectors. One is agriculture and the other one is higher education. Both are very different in nature, but both are suffering from that massive uncertainty. So if you look at agriculture, a traditional industry and a key part of the economy for a lot of the communities across the region, in particular to the north in the Fenlands. And if you take one of those key employers in that sector, a company called Gs, they rely on 2,500 seasonal workers every year in order for their business to be successful. Those people mainly come from Eastern Europe and they mainly come between April and September. And already they're seeing that actually the need of those employees is actually becoming very difficult because those employees are going elsewhere, going to Germany, for example. Now, Andrea Leadsom and the government say, why don't you employ more locals? Well, the way the system works is that locals don't want to do seasonal work. What they're looking for, and there is unemployment in that part of the region, is they're looking for full-time work. because if they do seasonal work, they lose their benefits. So the employers are stuck. They have a need for employees from seasonal workers in order to be successful and contribute to the economy, but they're unable to do so. And then if you look at a company like G's, they're being forced to take a decision, which may be to actually move production elsewhere in Europe and actually import back to the UK. A fundamental loss for many of those small communities up in the Fenland part of the region. So that's just one illustration. If you then turn to higher education, and clearly higher education here in this part of the region, Cambridge area, and increasingly in Peterborough, is a key sector. And in Cambridge, we have 2 universities. And at their heart, those universities are international in their outlook, and actually very European in their outlook as well. Both rely on a key element of staff coming from other European countries, and the government's position has placed those people in no man's land, in complete no man's land, not knowing where they should be or what they should do regarding their status. And also both rely on collaboration with other European partners to deliver research. And if you look back at the heritage of innovation that we have in this city and the broader area, a lot of its foundation is in that form of collaboration. And yet, the government has failed to provide answers or solutions to these types of issues. And so, unless there are any answers, this element of our economy, education, which is critical to the success of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, will be hit. So, it's my job, my role as the mayoral candidate. Well, firstly, I want to make my position very clear. I am European. And you may have seen a slogan which says Rod for Mayor. And actually, I'm trying to convince my campaign manager to also substitute that for Rod for Europe as a sub-slogan, because I am a passionate European. And so as a candidate, I believe it's important that one should campaign to ensure we remain part of the single market, to ensure that we treat those European nationals living in this country in a decent and fair way, removing that emotional uncertainty, and then to ensure that whatever the deal the government cuts with Europe, that there is an opportunity for voters to have a clear say as to whether or not they accept it. And as the role of mayor, it is important to recognise that the mayor will need to be a beacon for this area in relation to this once-in-a-lifetime issue. It's a once-in-a-lifetime issue that we will be deciding over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. So for me, what I want to be is I want to be that mayor. I want to be a strong voice for all the people in the region, protecting it from the consequences of those decisions that this government's going to take in relation to the EU. But I also think, as mayor, that it's important to put the positive case. It's important to put the positive case that frames the national debate in relation to our relationship with the EU going forward, but one that also acts in relation to the key issues that we face locally in relation to the EU. And it's in a positive case that we need to put ensuring that we have a strong Lib Dem voice for all those voters who voted Remain, but also that we put a positive case to those voters that also voted to leave. Thank you very much.